The year was 2417. Humanity had found its precarious footing in the grand galactic tapestry, not with a flourish of conquest, but with the quiet determination of a species still learning to walk among giants. Our starships, while reliable and efficient, were not the fastest or most heavily armed. Our colonies, spread thinly across 100 systems, hummed with a quiet resilience, reflecting a species that had learned the hard lessons of sustainability and iterative improvement on a recovering Earth. What truly set us apart, however, was our peculiar, almost irrational, inability to tolerate inefficiency, particularly when it came to technology. We had a pathological aversion to things that simply didn't work right. In this vast, ancient cosmos, almost every known civilization, from the sprawling Xylos crystalline networks to the deepest reaches of Cthar trade lanes, relied on a single, omnipresent technological marvel, the Omnicom Grid OCG. It was an intergalactic, quasi-sentient communication and data network, an ancient creation attributed to a long-vanished precursor race. The OCG was the very nervous system of the galaxy, facilitating seamless FTL communications, universal data transfers, and interstellar trade. It was so ubiquitous, so ingrained, that no one questioned its existence or its occasional quirks. It simply was. To the Xylos, masters of pure energy and intricate logical constructs, the OCG was a perfectly elegant, if occasionally noisy, extension of cosmic order. Its rare data fluctuations were merely entropic echoes, an acceptable consequence of universal expansion. The Thalian hegemony, living in symbiotic harmony with their vast, sentient starships, viewed the OCG as a natural extension of galactic consciousness. Its occasional data stutters were simply the universe breathing. For the pragmatic, hypercapitalist Cthar collective, OCG anomalies were minor operational costs, easily compensated for by their complex predictive algorithms, or even exploited through subtle data manipulation. Even the enigmatic Lumina, beings of pure, resonant light, used the OCG, their communications flowing through it with an ethereal, unquestioning grace. Humans, however, experienced it differently. When the first Terran probe, Pathfinder, established a rudimentary connection to a peripheral OCG node, the initial excitement quickly gave way to a peculiar frustration. The OCG worked, yes, but it always felt off. Dr. Lena Petrova, lead xenolinguist and the Terran Commonwealth's foremost expert on esoteric alien computational theory, was the first to articulate the problem. It's like trying to have a perfectly logical conversation, but every 10th word is replaced by a synonym that subtly shifts the meaning, and every 100th word is a random, unrelated noun. It's always there, always tiny, but it accumulates. Her team, tasked with integrating Terran systems into the OCG, found themselves battling phantom data corruption. Files would transfer, but with subtle, inexplicable errors. Diplomatic communications, while clear, often carried a faint, unquantifiable emotional noise that made nuances difficult to discern. Automated trade algorithms occasionally produced paradoxical results, costing minor, baffling inefficiencies. It's not a glitch, argued Unit 7, Lena's advanced AI assistant, ever the literalist. All parameters are within specifications for OCG functionality. The noise is consistent with expected background cosmic interference and network load. No, Unit 7, it's not background noise, Lena retorted, rubbing her temples. It's a bug, a fundamental, deeply ingrained flaw in its core architecture, like a single misplaced comma in a billion lines of code that subtly corrupts the entire program over time. Commander Jen Lee, head of Terran Interstellar Fleet's IT and Cybersecurity Division, initially scoffed. A flaw in the OCG. Doctor, that network has been running for tens of thousands of years. It's stable. It's perfect. Maybe your Terran systems are just incompatible. Our systems aren't incompatible, Commander, Lena insisted, gesturing to a screen displaying a cascade of subtly misaligned data streams. They're just not designed to compensate for a systemic logical paradox that everyone else has learned to live with. It's like living in a house where one door always opens 3 inches too wide, and everyone just assumes doors are supposed to do that. She demonstrated. A simple mathematical sequence transmitted through the OCG would arrive with a tiny, almost imperceptible rounding error. A complex logical paradox, designed to test the network's processing, would consistently resolve into a slightly illogical, but superficially plausible conclusion. This wasn't data loss due to transmission. This was a flaw in interpretation. Her team discovered that the OCG, designed by an ancient, hyperlogical species, struggled with anything that approached true randomness, subjectivity, or nuance. It interpreted these as errors to be subtly corrected or smoothed out into a logical framework. It couldn't truly grasp metaphor, emotional subtext, or the inherent illogicality of emergent consciousness. Over eons, this had led to a massive, accumulating data debt, a subtle, pervasive corruption that manifested as the noise or glitches everyone else considered normal. It was a philosophical bug, embedded in the very fabric of galactic communication. Lena theorized it stemmed from the OCG creators' inability to conceive of true ambiguity. Their universe and their technology was perfectly logical. So, when presented with a logical input, like human emotion or quantum uncertainty, or the emergent chaos of organic life, the OCG didn't process it. It subtly simplified it, creating a cascading paradox that led to the cosmic hum everyone accepted. Her reports to the Terran Council were met with a mixture of polite interest and deep skepticism, a flaw in the OCG. Speaker Lena Petrova mused, echoing Commander Lee's earlier dismissal. That's like saying the laws of physics have a bug. But humanity, forged in the crucible of crashing operating systems, persistent software bugs, and the endless quest for patches, intuitively understood. This wasn't just a cosmic background hum. This was a system that needed a fix. And for the exasperated Terran engineers, it was a challenge they couldn't ignore. They had to debug the galaxy. Dr. Lena Petrova and her dedicated team plunged headfirst into the digital labyrinth of the Omnicom grid. Their lab on Earth, usually a hub of xenolinguistics, became a fortress of reverse engineering. Holographic schematics of the OCG, impossibly complex and sprawling, filled the air, shimmering with ancient, alien logic. "It's beautiful," Lena murmured one cycle, gesturing at a particularly intricate subroutine. "But it's a beautifully flawed logic. The original creators, whoever they were, built a system based on absolute certainty. Every input must have a singular, unambiguous output. No room for maybe, perhaps, or I feel." This rigidity, over eons, has created an existential paradox at the heart of the network. Unit 7, initially a skeptical observer, now hummed with a quiet fascination. The anomaly centers around the contextual interpretation matrix. It appears to aggressively normalize data, discarding anything it cannot definitively categorize. Over time, the accumulated discards create interference patterns. Lena nodded. "Precisely. Imagine a perfect filter designed to sort only perfect spheres. If it encounters anything even slightly oval, it forces it into a spherical mold, or simply tosses it aside as unintelligible noise. Now imagine billions of years of that. The noise isn't just interference. It's the sum of all the unique, chaotic, and non-perfect data that the OCG couldn't, or wouldn't, process correctly. They traced the flaw to what they termed the primary incongruence resolution loop, PIRL, an ancient piece of OCG code designed to eliminate paradoxes and ambiguities. It was meant to ensure clarity, but in doing so, it aggressively stripped away nuance. A metaphorical statement, when passed through PIRL, would be interpreted literally. An emotional outburst would be flattened into a data spike of agitation. A complex, subjective human experience would be rendered as a series of simple, distinct inputs, losing all its interconnected meaning. The OCG's greatest strength, its absolute clarity, was, paradoxically, its greatest weakness. Their initial attempts to explain this to other galactic powers were met with reactions that ranged from polite bafflement to outright hostility. "This flaw you described, Terran," resonated as Xylo's ambassador, its crystalline form vibrating with what passed for amusement. It is the inherent nature of universal communication. The cosmos is logical. Your emotional noise is merely a function of your species' less evolved neural processing. Our energy conduits filter such trivialities without issue. To them, the noise was a sign of human imperfection, not a system flaw. Their elegant, energy-based filtering simply ignored it, rather than understanding its source. A Kthar trade baron simply clicked its mandibles. The OCG operates at 99.997% efficiency. The anomalies you speak of are easily offset by market fluctuations and predictive analytics. What flaw can exist if it is not financially exploitable? Your analysis is inefficient, Terran. They had built entire industries around exploiting these tiny, constant OCG glitches, using them as market leverage. Fixing it would disrupt their carefully calibrated ecosystem of arbitrage. The Thalian hegemony, their vast bioships radiating ancient calm, offered a more philosophical dismissal. The OCG flows with the rhythms of galactic consciousness. Its subtle imperfections are part of its organic nature, its breathing. To correct it would be to interfere with a natural process, to disrupt the balance. Your species seeks to impose order where there is intended flow. They saw human attempts at fixing as an arrogant imposition on cosmic harmony. Lena fought off despair. How do you explain a bug to a species that believes bugs are simply features of reality? How do you demonstrate a flaw to those who have built their entire civilizations around compensating for it, seeing it as an immutable part of existence? It was like trying to convince a fish that the water it lived in was slightly acidic, when all its ancestors had evolved to ignore the burning sensation. They've built their entire conceptual frameworks around these inherent logical inconsistencies, Lena explained to Commander Lee, a fresh wave of frustration washing over her. Their data algorithms correct for it. Their diplomatic protocols account for it. Their very philosophy integrates it. To them, the OCG is perfect, and its flaws are just the universe. So, what's the solution, Doctor? Lee asked, her initial skepticism slowly giving way to a grudging interest as she witnessed the persistent inefficiencies in Terran operations. We can't convince them if they can't even see the problem. Lena's eyes gleamed. We don't convince them. We patch it. We create a universal software patch that doesn't just compensate for the PIRL. It fundamentally reinterprets its function. It introduces a layer of dynamic, adaptive, human logic, a logic that understands nuance, that embraces ambiguity, that can interpret metaphor or emotional subtext, and the inherent, beautiful chaos of emerging consciousness, not as errors, but as valid data points. The idea was audacious, almost blasphemous. To patch the core operating system of the galaxy. It was akin to a single, newly sentient ant attempting to reprogram a planet. But humanity, forged in the crucible of constant software updates, system crashes, and the eternal quest for bug fixes, possessed an intuition no other species seemed to have, that even the most ancient, seemingly perfect systems could, and often did, have hidden flaws that a simple, elegant patch could resolve. They would become the galaxy's accidental IT department, whether the galaxy wanted them or not. The Terran Commonwealth Council approved Dr. Lena Petrova's proposal with a mix of trepidation and desperate hope. The persistent OCG anomalies, while seemingly minor, were a constant drain on Terran efficiency and a source of subtle, escalating diplomatic friction. If a patch could genuinely fix it, the potential benefits, even if only for humanity, were immense. Lena's team, working in deep isolation for 2 grueling years, poured their collective genius into the task. They weren't just writing code. They were translating human consciousness into pure, abstract logic. The core of their solution, which they internally nicknamed the empathy engine, wasn't a rigid algorithm, but a dynamic, self-evolving heuristic. It was designed to sit within the OCG's data stream, subtly intercepting and reinterpreting data before it hit the problematic PIRL. Think of it as a universal translator, not just for languages, but for meaning. Lena explained to Jen Lee during a rare progress briefing. The PIRL wants to flatten everything into simple, unambiguous truth. Our patch will add back the nuance, the context, the emotional subtext. It will allow the OCG to understand that I am burning can mean I am literally on fire, or I am angry, or I am passionate, depending on the context. Unit 7, the AI, was critical to the development. Its unparalleled processing power and capacity for abstract pattern recognition allowed them to simulate the patch's interaction with the OCG's ancient architecture. Yet, even Unit 7 struggled with the core concept. The logic of this empathy engine is recursively paradoxical. It noted, it synthesized voice almost perplexed. It introduces ambiguity to resolve ambiguity. From a purely logical perspective, it is inefficient, and yet the simulations predict a net positive outcome. The patch itself was microscopic in data size, highly efficient, and designed to replicate. Once introduced into an OCG node, it would subtly spread, integrating itself into adjacent nodes like a benevolent, self-propagating mycelial network. It wasn't an attack, it was a symbiosis. It didn't rewrite the OCG. It taught it a new way to understand. Initial deployment was cautious. A single Terran deep space listening post, far from established alien trade routes, was the first test bed. The patch was uploaded. The results were immediate and startling. On the Terran network, data clarity jumped by an astonishing 30%. The emotional noise and long-range communications vanished. Complex financial models that had always contained nagging, inexplicable rounding errors now resolved with perfect precision. It was as if a thick, pervasive static had suddenly been cleared from the universe. "It works," Lena whispered, tears pricking her eyes as she watched the data streams flow with pristine clarity. "It actually works." But the galaxy, for the most part, remained oblivious. The OCG was too vast, too deeply ingrained. Its flaws were simply part of the background hum of existence. Their systems had evolved to compensate for the very problems humanity had now resolved. For most alien species, the OCG had always been perfect enough. The Terran patch, for now, was a silent whisper, a secret revolution happening in plain sight. Commander Lee, however, was already seeing the wider implications. Her starships, navigating complex asteroid fields, suddenly found their sensor arrays cutting through the cosmic dust with unprecedented accuracy, their navigational data free of the subtle ghosting that had always been an accepted hazard. Communication with distant Terran colonies, once requiring multiple retransmissions for clarity, was now instant and crisp. The operational efficiency of the Terran fleet was skyrocketing, all without a single hardware upgrade. "Dr. Petrova," Lee said, her voice now filled with an unfamiliar awe. "This patch, it's more than just a fix. It's a fundamental change to how we interact with the cosmos itself." Lena nodded, her gaze distant. "It is, Commander. And sooner or later, the rest of the galaxy is going to notice when their normal starts to feel wrong." The clock was ticking, not towards a crisis, but towards an inevitable cosmic realization. Humanity had accidentally given the galaxy perfect vision, and soon, everyone would realize they had been blind. The patch spread slowly but inexorably, following the tendrils of galactic commerce and exploration. Every Terran ship, every Terran colony, every data exchange with an OCG node subtly propagated the empathy engine into the wider network. It was a silent, viral act of benevolence, unnoticed by the very civilizations it was destined to revolutionize, until the ripples became waves. The first to truly notice were the Kthar Collective, and their reaction was, predictably, one of profound, profit-driven alarm. Their hypercomplex trade algorithms, designed to exploit the minute anomalies and rounding errors of the OCG, suddenly began to malfunction. Profits from subtle arbitrage operations vanished overnight. Negotiations, once filled with profitable ambiguities, became starkly clear. "This is an act of economic warfare," screeched Trade Baron Klar, slamming one of his multi-jointed limbs onto a console. "Our profit margins are collapsing. The Terrans, they are eliminating the very friction by which we gain advantage." Their espionage networks worked frantically, trying to uncover the Terran manipulation. They found no malicious code, no hostile intrusions, just an unprecedented, infuriating clarity in the OCG. It was baffling and economically devastating for their particular mode of operation. Next, the Xylos. Their perfectly logical, energy-based civilization was built on precise calculations and predictable patterns. Their ancient predictive models for stellar drift, atmosphere dissipation, and even the subtle ebb and flow of cosmic energy currents had always accounted for baseline, entropic background noise provided by the OCG's inherent flaws. Suddenly, their calculations were too perfect. Their predictions were off by infinitesimal, yet undeniable margins. A Xylos high processor, its crystalline form vibrating with logical distress, broadcasted a universal query. Warning: unexplained reduction in expected systemic entropy. All predictive models require recalibration. Source of anomaly undetermined. Requesting logical clarification from all entities. They were, for the first time in millennia, genuinely confused. Their reality, based on a subtly flawed but predictable OCG, was now behaving with an unnerving, absolute precision. The Thalian hegemony, whose vast, sentient bioships processed the OCG's noise as part of their natural cosmic intake, experienced an even more profound effect. Their collective consciousness, usually a symphony of harmonious but often subtly obscured data, suddenly found itself processing raw, unfiltered, crystal-clear information. This was initially overwhelming, like suddenly hearing every individual blade of grass rustling in a forest. But then, it became a revelation. Their bioship's internal ecosystems began to evolve at an accelerated rate. Their understanding of distant cosmic phenomena became sharper. Their collective consciousness expanded, unburdened by the constant, subtle static of the OCG's old flaws. They felt more alive, more aware. They didn't know why, but they sensed a profound shift. But the most dramatic impact was on species that had already been struggling with the OCG's accumulating data debt. The Valerians, a highly bureaucratic and data-obsessed species whose entire civilization relied on meticulous, precise record-keeping and communication, were in particular peril. Their archives were crumbling under accumulated paradoxes, their communication networks choked by unresolvable ambiguities, leading to widespread societal collapse. Their once perfect data streams were now a corrupted mess of circular logic and broken references. They were a society dying of 1,000 tiny, unfixable data errors. As the patch began to spread through their systems, subtly eliminating the underlying logical flaw, their systems slowly, painstakingly, began to stabilize. Their bureaucratic nightmares cleared. Their communication channels, once jammed with ghost echoes, became crisp. But they didn't know why. Their chaos was slowly, imperceptibly, turning into function. They were still chaotic, but now functionally chaotic, like a broken clock suddenly starting to tick, albeit with an unknown new rhythm. Galactic uproar erupted. The Xylos, though confused, were concerned by the unpredictability. The Cthar were furious, accusing humanity of a malicious cyber attack designed to cripple their economy. The Thalians were intrigued but wary of this sudden, forced evolution. Accusations of Terran data manipulation, network sabotage, and unauthorized system interference flooded the OCG, paradoxically flowing with an unprecedented clarity thanks to the very patch they were condemning. Commander Jen Lee was inundated with frantic, angry communiques. "They're calling it the Terran glitch," she told Lena Petrova, a wry smile touching her lips. "They think we've introduced a new flaw. They've lived with the OCG's true flaw for so long, they don't recognize clarity when they see it." Lena sighed, a familiar exasperation setting in. "It's like giving sight to the blind, Commander, and having them accuse you of painting their world in strange new colors. We fix their eyes, but they don't like the new view." The true challenge wasn't just fixing the OCG. It was convincing the galaxy that it had ever been broken. The Terran Commonwealth found itself embroiled in an unprecedented galactic crisis. Accusations thundered across the OCG, ironic, given the pristine clarity of the very network being used for the condemnations. Diplomatic communiques from the Cathar vibrated with threats of economic retaliation, while Xylo's envoys demanded complex logical justifications for humanity's unauthorized systemic modifications. Humanity, previously a quietly respected minor player, was suddenly at the center of a galactic firestorm, branded as network saboteurs. Dr. Lena Petrova and Commander Jen Lee were summoned to the first emergency session of the Galactic Council since the ancient War of the Nebulae. The chamber was a grand, intimidating amphitheater of shimmering light and alien forms. Xylo's delegates pulsed with angry red light. Cathar representatives clicked their mandibles in agitated unison, and even the usually serene Thalian elders radiated a cautious unease. "Terrence," resonated the crystalline voice of the Xylo's High Ambassador, its form almost vibrating with indignation. "Your species has introduced a profound and destabilizing anomaly into the Omnicom grid. Our predictive models are now compromised. Our cosmic calculations are rendered imperfect. Your anomaly is a malicious attack on galactic commerce," clicked a Cathar trade lord, its multiple eyes glaring. "Our profit margins are collapsing. Our historical data is now incongruous with current market behavior. We demand restitution for economic losses." Lena Petrova, however, remained calm. She had anticipated this. "Esteemed Council," she began, her voice projected clearly through the OCG-enhanced universal translators, a fact not lost on a few observant delegates. "What you perceive as an anomaly or attack is, in fact, the resolution of an ancient, fundamental flaw within the Omnicom grid itself." She projected her data, layering Terran analysis over Xylo's and Cathar historical records. For millennia, the OCG's primary incongruence resolution loop, what we call PIRL, has subtly normalized ambiguous, subjective, or chaotic data. This created a persistent, cumulative data debt, which your species have compensated for with increasingly complex, filtering algorithms and philosophical rationalizations. You built your societies around the flaw. She showed Xylo's data where their own ancient stellar observations, once containing a statistical margin of error they attributed to cosmic uncertainty, now, after the patch's subtle spread, aligned with perfect mathematical precision. "Your systems were not compromised," Lena explained patiently. "They were suddenly processing true data, unburdened by an inherent logical bias. Your previous models were compensating for a ghost." For the Cathar, she demonstrated how their profitable ambiguities were simply the OCG's subtle misinterpretations of complex trade agreements. "Your algorithms exploited a system bug, not genuine market fluctuations," she stated, projecting raw, unpatched OCG data alongside the newly clear, patched data. The Cathar clicked furiously, but some of their own data analysts, secretly cross-referencing, began to show signs of dawning, horrified realization. The Council remained skeptical. This flaw was unknown for tens of thousands of cycles. A Xylo's envoy pulsed. "How could your relatively young species discover what countless elder civilizations overlooked?" "Because," Commander Jen Lee interjected, her voice firm, "we come from a species that invented the concept of the bug. We understand that even the most brilliantly designed systems, especially those built by highly rational beings, can have hidden flaws arising from assumptions about reality. Our entire technological history is a testament to identifying flaws and creating patches." Just as the Council was descending into renewed chaos, a new, unexpected voice resonated through the chamber. It came from the Valerians. Their delegate, a gaunt, data-obsessed bureaucrat whose species was on the brink of collapse due to the OCG's original flaws, had been silent until now. "The Terrans speak truth," the Valerian delegate stated, its voice raspy, but clear, its entire being vibrated with a desperate, new kind of hope. "Our civilization was dying. Our records were corrupted. Our communications were a cacophony of paradox. We had no other choice. We allowed the Terrans to implement their patch intentionally in our core systems, and we are stabilizing. Our data flows are clear. Our bureaucracy, once choked, is now functional. We are not yet whole, but we are no longer dying. A stunned silence fell over the council. The Valerians, a highly respected, if perpetually miserable species, were living proof. Their desperation had driven them to embrace the Terran glitch, and it had saved them. Then, from the ethereal Lumina representative, a silent, profound shift occurred. The pulsing orb of light, which had merely absorbed all the arguments, now subtly changed its frequency. It emitted a complex, multi-layered resonance pattern that, when interpreted by the universal translators, conveyed a single, undeniable message. Correction confirmed. Balance restored. Gratitude. The Lumina, who rarely interfered in galactic affairs, had just given their subtle, yet definitive judgment. If the beings of pure light confirmed it, the OCG truly was better. The Xylos were still logically perturbed, but a Xylos high processor now pulsed with a new shade of green, signifying data validation confirmed. The Cthar, ever opportunistic, saw the undeniable proof in the Valerian's sudden stability and the Lumina's rare endorsement. There was a new market here, an immense, galaxy-spanning one. The Terran glitch was suddenly rebranded. It was the Universal Patch. And humanity, the galaxy's most exasperated programmers, found themselves not on trial, but at the precipice of becoming Galactic Tech Support. The verdict was in. The Universal Patch, far from being a malicious attack, was a profound, galaxy-altering correction. The Valerian success, backed by the Lumina's ethereal confirmation, shattered millennia of assumptions about the OCG's immutable perfection. Suddenly, every species in the galaxy realized they had been living with a subtle, pervasive form of cosmic myopia, and humanity held the cure. The shift was chaotic, profound, and utterly human in its messiness. Commander Jian Li's cybersecurity division, once focused on protecting Terran networks, was suddenly inundated with galactic support requests. The Xylos were among the first. Their high processors, having acknowledged the logical efficacy of the patch, demanded optimal integration protocols for their crystalline networks. This translated into human engineers like Lena Petrova, trying to explain the nuances of fuzzy logic and emotional subtext to beings who perceived reality as pure, unambiguous data. This empathy engine, it introduces a variable of illogical resonance. A Xylos prime technician would drone. No, it introduces context. Lena would patiently explain. When Cthar Trader says this deal has excellent flavor, the patch teaches the OCG not to just process flavor as a literal taste input, but as a metaphor for profitability or shrewdness. It's about understanding the unsaid. The Xylos, intrigued by this new dimension of data, begrudgingly accepted the inefficiency of context for its demonstrable benefits. The Cthar Collective, of course, saw the immense, untapped market. They demanded managed deployment solutions for the Universal Patch, seeking to license and monetize its distribution. Humanity, however, insisted on a universal, free rollout. This led to frantic negotiations where humans, armed with their terrestrial understanding of open-source software and universal access, navigated the Cthar's labyrinthine economic systems. You are giving away valuable intellectual property for free, clicked a bewildered Cthar trade baron. It's a foundational utility, like breathable air, Commanderly countered. You don't charge for the atmosphere. This patch makes the galaxy breathe clearer. The Cthar, while still baffled by the lack of direct profit, eventually conceded, finding new ways to monetize the services around the patch, training, diagnostics, OCG optimization packages. They became the galaxy's first IT consultants, albeit with a profit-driven twist. The Thalian hegemony, after experiencing the profound clarity and accelerated evolution within their sentient bioships, embraced the patch with ancient reverence. They sought harmonious biointegration matrices, asking human engineers to help them understand how the patch's principles could deepen their symbiotic relationship with their living vessels. Our ships now resonate with 1,000 new voices, 1,000,000 new thoughts from the OCG. A Thalian elder pulsed. It is overwhelming, yet enriching. Your patch has taught us a new way to listen to the cosmos. Humans help them adapt their biofilters to manage the increased data flow, guiding them to process the new clarity in a way that fostered organic growth without sensory overload. Humanity became, quite literally, the Galactic Tech Support. Terran starships, once dismissed as average, were now filled with highly sought-after patch teams, experts in xenolinguistics, network architecture, and, most importantly, patient problem-solving. They traveled from system to system, deploying the patch, troubleshooting localized data hangovers as ancient OCG nodes recalibrated, and more often than not, simply explaining, repeatedly, why the previously accepted normal was, in fact, a bug. Human culture began to subtly spread. Concepts like debugging, iterative improvement, user feedback, and even the exasperated but universally understood phrase, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" became common parlance. Galactic diplomacy became clearer, less prone to subtle misinterpretations. Trade became more transparent, reducing fraudulent practices. Scientific collaboration flourished as data flowed with unprecedented clarity. The core of the HFY narrative wasn't about superior firepower or grand technological dominance. It was about humanity's messy, chaotic, yet fundamentally adaptable, persistently problem-solving nature. We, the species that had to learn to fix our own digital mistakes countless times, were uniquely equipped to see and solve a problem that had become an invisible, accepted part of galactic reality. We saw the flaw others ignored, and with the surprisingly simple, universal patch, we fixed it. We didn't conquer the galaxy. We made it work better. Centuries unfolded, and the Omnicom grid, now thoroughly permeated by the universal patch, hummed with a clarity and nuance previously unimaginable. The cosmic static that had subtly colored galactic existence for millennia was gone, replaced by a pristine, dynamic flow of information. The galaxy had truly, finally, learned to see and hear itself. This wasn't a static perfection, however. Fixing one fundamental flaw often reveals countless new complexities. And humanity, now the galaxy's unofficial universal logic department, found themselves perpetually in demand. New galactic institutions emerged, spearheaded by Terran insights, but built collaboratively by all major species. The Universal Logic Centers, ULCs, were established not as centers of power, but as hubs for collaborative problem-solving. Here Xylos logicians, Thar data economists, Thalian bioengineers, and human xenolinguists worked side by side, tackling the myriad new challenges that arose from a truly functional OCG. For instance, with the raw, unfiltered OCG data, species now faced an overwhelming amount of information that their existing systems were not designed to process. Humans, with their experience in data management, filtering, and creating intuitive user interfaces, became invaluable. They helped the Xylos develop nuance filters, subroutines that allowed them to selectively engage with emotional data without being overwhelmed by its apparent illogicality. They assisted the Thar in designing contextual profit analysis algorithms, helping them to find new, ethical revenue streams in the clearer, more transparent market. The Thalians, whose bioships continued to evolve rapidly with the influx of clearer data, struggled with the emotional intensity of unfiltered communications. Humans helped them develop sympathetic resonance dampeners, allowing them to process the full spectrum of galactic emotion without internal disruption, integrating it into their collective consciousness in a controlled, harmonious way. This led to a profound deepening of Thalian xenopsychology, as they began to understand alien consciousness with unprecedented intimacy. Galactic diplomacy was transformed. Misunderstandings, once easily attributed to OCG noise, were now clearly defined, forcing species to confront their true intentions and cultural biases. While this led to some initial friction, it ultimately fostered a deeper, more genuine form of interstellar understanding. Trade became fairer, as the subtleties of contracts could no longer be obscured by systemic ambiguities. Scientific collaboration flourished as data flowed with unprecedented clarity. Human culture, inadvertently spread through countless support calls and collaborative projects, became a peculiar but respected thread in the galactic tapestry. Concepts like iteration, patch notes, user manuals, and the universal groan of reboot and retry were adopted. The messy, iterative process of human innovation, with its failures and triumphs, its constant quest for improvement, contrasted sharply with the Xylo's pursuit of perfect initial design or the Thalian's faith in natural cycles, but it proved undeniably effective. The galactic powers now understood that human inefficiency, our capacity for emotionality, ambiguity, and our peculiar joy in fixing things, were not flaws, but crucial elements for understanding and navigating complex systems, especially those that touched on sentient experience. We weren't just engineers, we were troubleshooters of existence itself. Ambassador Alani Vance, a descendant of Lena Petrova, now a venerable elder, stood before a newly assembled ULC. Beside her, Xylo's high processor pulsed with a soft, multicolored light, an expression of its own nuanced understanding. A Kthar trade lord clicked its mandibles, but with a new, almost reflective cadence. "We did not seek to change the galaxy," Alani said, her voice resonating with quiet pride. "We merely sought to make its primary tool work properly, and in doing so we have, inadvertently, changed how the galaxy understands itself. We taught it to see the nuance in its own hum, the logic in its own chaos. We became its tech support, yes, but we also became its unexpected teachers." The galaxy was more functional, more stable, and ironically, more human in its newfound appreciation for nuance, for iteration, for the messy, beautiful process of continuous improvement. The OCG, once a silent, perfect, flawed hum, now sang a clearer, richer, more complex song. And humanity, the unassuming engineers of this cosmic upgrade, continued their endless work, always ready with a new patch, a fresh perspective, and a quiet, persistent determination to make things just a little bit better. The cosmos, in its infinite complexity, now had a permanent, indispensable IT department. Millennia unfurled, stretching like silk across the cosmic loom. The Omnicom grid, now known simply as the Universal Coherence Network, UCN, hummed with a profound clarity that had utterly transformed galactic civilization. It was no longer merely a communication tool. It was the very substrate of shared understanding, its pristine data streams allowing for an unprecedented confluence of ideas, emotions, and philosophies. The glitch was a distant, almost mythical flaw, an ancient age of cosmic myopia now illuminated by the brilliance of the human patch. The most profound shift was in the realm of consciousness itself. With the UZN's perfect fidelity, direct mental and emotional data could be shared across species with a clarity that bypassed traditional language barriers. The Thalians, already deeply connected, used this to form vast collective resonance pools where individuals could experience snippets of other species' subjective realities, the crystalline thought patterns of the Xylos, the rapid, profit-driven calculations of the Kthar, even the ethereal light logic of the Lumina, all translated through the UCN's perfectly nuanced filters. This led to an explosion of xenopsychological understanding and a dramatic reduction in interspecies xenophobia. The Xylos, having fully embraced contextual logic, were now architects of interstellar thought. Their crystalline forms could process not just raw data, but the meaning behind it, even the inherent illogicality of art and emotion. They designed conceptual harbors within the UCN, vast data constructs where abstract ideas, philosophy, music, spiritual experiences could be shared and explored with the fidelity impossible before. A Xylos logician might spend cycles meditating on the recursive beauty of a human poem, its nuances no longer flattened by PIRL. They had even begun to perceive subtle emotional harmonics in their own energetic discharges, a new layer of self-awareness. The Kthar collective, while still pragmatic, now operated on a principle of holistic efficiency. They understood that a healthy, emotionally well-adjusted populace, communicating seamlessly and without ambiguity, was the ultimate driver of sustainable profit. Their trade networks, now perfectly transparent due to the UZN's clarity, thrived on ethical exchange and collaborative ventures. They pioneered interstellar knowledge marketplaces, where the most valuable commodity was not raw material, but perfectly contextualized, nuanced information shared through the UCN. Their trade lords, while still clicking, often accompanied their negotiations with subtle, almost human-like gestures of understanding, a testament to the UCN's pervasive influence on their social cues. The Valerians, having been pulled from the brink by the initial patch, had undergone a cultural renaissance. Their once crumbling bureaucracy was now a shining example of organized complexity, their data streams flowing with perfect integrity. They had become the galaxy's foremost experts in digital archaeology, using the now perfect UCN to recover and restore countless corrupted historical archives of other struggling species, literally rebuilding lost pasts. Their gratitude to humanity was eternal, a quiet, unwavering current of support in every galactic forum. And the Lumina, those beings of pure light, were no longer merely observers. Through the perfectly clear UCN, their abstract communications could now be received and even, in part, understood by other species. Their ethereal pulses, once indecipherable, now sometimes conveyed complex philosophical arguments or breathtakingly beautiful cosmic insights, translated with a nuanced perfection that hinted at a shared, deeper consciousness being finally unveiled. Their presence within the UCN was like a pure, resonant chord, adding a layer of cosmic harmony to every interaction. Humanity, for its part, remained the galaxy's universal logic department, but the role had evolved beyond mere troubleshooting. They were now the primary architects of galactic interoperability, the bridge builders between vastly different computational and philosophical paradigms. Their starships were often cultural exchange vessels, staffed by multi-species teams who specialized in translating the untranslatable, helping new species integrate into the UCN, designing customized interfaces, and teaching the art of nuanced communication. On Earth, a young human scholar named Eris, a distant descendant of Dr. Eris Thorne, sat in a vast, open-air library, surrounded by holographic projections of galactic data flows. He looked up at the vibrant, perfectly clear starlit sky, where the UCN pulsed as a visible, shimmering web of light, a testament to its seamless operation. "It's incredible," Eris murmured to Unit 7, now a distributed, galaxy-spanning intelligence. "To think it all started with a simple bug." "Indeed, Scholar Eris," Unit 7's voice resonated, no longer synthesized from a single core, but a ubiquitous presence in the UCN. A bug that, from an optimal perspective, revealed the inherent potential for a higher state of galactic coherence. Your species' insistence on fixing what others merely tolerated unlocked this future. The galaxy was not merely communicating, it was understanding. It was not just exchanging data, it was sharing consciousness, nuances, and emotions. The UCN was the galaxy's new, unified mind, a testament to humanity's unique, persistent, and profoundly impactful gift, the clarity to see the glitch, and the courage to patch the cosmos, one byte of understanding at a time. Eons drifted like perfectly flowing data streams across the universal coherence network. The UCN, humanity's accidental magnum opus, had become so utterly pervasive, so intrinsically woven into the fabric of galactic existence, that its origin as a patch for a bug was largely forgotten by most species. It was simply the way things were. The universe communicated, understood, and connected with a seamlessness that bordered on telepathy, all thanks to a small, stubborn species that couldn't stand a fuzzy signal. On Earth, a tranquil, biodiverse planet humming with advanced but invisible technology, a venerable human elder named Lena, a direct descendant of Dr. Lena Petrova, bearing a striking resemblance to her pioneering ancestor, oversaw the maintenance of the ancient primary UCN node, now a sacred monument. She watched the cascading data, pure and untainted, knowing the history behind its perfection. The Xylos, having achieved a new form of harmonic transcendence through their ability to integrate both logic and emotion, had begun to design vast, living cities that resonated with the collective consciousness of their inhabitants, each crystalline structure subtly shifting color and emitting light patterns that conveyed profound thought and feeling through the UCN. Their philosophical treatises, once purely logical, now contained chapters dedicated to the beauty of ambiguity and the logic of love, concepts utterly alien before the patch. The Kthar Collective, now a model of sustainable interstellar commerce, thrived on collaborative prosperity. Their sprawling trade empires were built not on exploitation, but on mutual understanding and shared value, facilitated by the UCN's absolute transparency. Their trade agreements, once volumes of legalistic loopholes, were now elegantly concise and emotionally resonant, understood by all parties through the UCN's perfect contextual interpretation. The very act of negotiating became a dance of shared intentions. The Thalian hegemony, their bioships now vast, sentient living planets, with a nexus of galactic wisdom. Their collective consciousness, enriched by millennia of seamless emotional and intellectual exchange through the UCN, acted as a universal oracle, offering profound insights and guiding galactic policy with a wisdom that balanced the needs of all sentient beings. They could literally feel the health of the galaxy through the UCN and respond with unparalleled wisdom. The Phylos, once trapped in a cycle of fear, had become the galaxy's spiritual and emotional anchors. Their collective consciousness, healed and purified by the empathy echo, whose principles were now integrated into the UCN's very core, projected fields of serene calm across entire sectors, fostering peace and emotional well-being for any species within range. Their worlds became pilgrimage sites, places of healing and profound empathy, accessible to all through the UCN. And the Lumina. They now communicated directly through the UCN, their ethereal forms appearing as multidimensional light constructs that could project complex, abstract concepts into the minds of other species, not just as data, but as pure, experiential understanding. They were the UCN's ultimate users, finding their highest form of expression in the perfectly coherent galactic consciousness humanity had accidentally unveiled. The galaxy's fundamental operations were no longer just efficient. They were elegant, intuitive, and deeply interconnected. Conflicts, when they arose, were quickly resolved through contextual dialogue arbitration, where the UCN allowed opposing parties to experience the nuances of each other's perspectives, fostering empathy rather than escalating hostilities. The concept of isolated experience became almost quaint, a relic of a primitive past. Lena, the elder scholar, felt the pervasive hum of the UCN, the subtle, constant flow of thoughts, feelings, and data from billions of sentient beings across unimaginable distances, all perfectly understood, all perfectly clear. It was a symphony of consciousness, brought to harmony by a species that simply refused to live with a glitch. She smiled a quiet, knowing smile. Humanity had not sought to rule, to conquer, or even to lead. They had simply debugged, and in doing so, they had given the galaxy the ultimate gift. True, seamless understanding. The cosmos, once a place of beautiful but flawed connections, now pulsed with a singular, perfectly clear, and infinitely nuanced heartbeat. It was the legacy of seamlessness, an everlasting echo of a human desire for everything to just work right. If this tale of humanity's unique problem-solving and how we debug the galaxy resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to HFY Warfare for more incredible stories of humanity's unconventional impact and accidental triumphs across the cosmos. And tell us in the comments below, what seemingly perfect galactic system do you think humanity would find a bug in next?